Welcome to my channel, where fear lives in every story. If you enjoy dark stories, don't forget to like this video. And comment below where you're watching from, and what time it is for you. Now.
Lily had just turned 6 the week before, and she had been begging me for days to take her to see the new dolls at Brennan's, this big department store, about 20 minutes from our apartment in Wilmington. It was a Saturday afternoon in April 2017, one of those bright spring days where the sun made everything feel safe and normal. I had just wrapped up a long week managing inventory at a warehouse distribution center. The kind of job where you spend most of your time staring at spreadsheets and wondering how you ended up there after college. My husband was out of town visiting his mother in Virginia, so it was just me and Lily for the weekend. She was wearing her favorite purple jacket, the one with the little butterfly patches she had picked out herself, and her hair was in 2 messy pigtails because I never could get them as neat as my mom used to do mine. We walked into that store holding hands, and I remember thinking how much I loved these small moments with her, just the two of us on a simple Saturday errand. Brennan's was crowded that day, packed with families doing their weekend shopping, and the toy section sat in the back corner of the second floor. We took the escalator up, Lily bouncing with excitement the whole ride, her little fingers gripping the rubber handrail. The store had this particular layout, where the toy aisles formed a maze of bright colors and cardboard displays, and the doll section was right next to a wall of stuffed animals that stretched from floor to ceiling. I parked our cart at the end of the aisle and told Lily she could walk ahead to look at the dolls while I checked my phone for a message from my husband. She skipped forward maybe 10 feet, still completely within my sight, her purple jacket like a beacon among the pastel packaging. I glanced down at my phone for what felt like 3 seconds, maybe 5 at most. When I looked up, a woman I had never seen before had her hand wrapped around my daughter's wrist and was pulling her toward the opposite end of the aisle. The woman was maybe in her late 40s, with short auburn hair that looked freshly dyed and a beige cardigan over a floral blouse. She looked like someone's aunt, like someone you might see at a PTA meeting or a church potluck. That was the thing that made everything feel so surreal in those first seconds. She did not look threatening at all. She was leaning down toward Lily with this calm, patient expression, the kind of face adults make when they are trying to reason with a fussy child. Lily was pulling back, her little sneakers squeaking against the linoleum, and I could see the confusion on her face turning into fear. I dropped my phone. I think it hit the floor, but I did not hear it, and I started moving toward them. Everything felt like it was happening underwater, too slow and too fast at the same time, and I remember my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The woman saw me coming, and her expression did not change at all, which was somehow worse than if she had looked panicked or guilty. She tightened her grip on Lily's wrist and started walking faster, saying something to my daughter in this low, even voice. I was close enough now to hear the words, and they made my whole body go cold. She was saying, "Come on, sweetie, your mom is waiting for us by the car. Do not make a scene, okay? Do not make a scene." Lily looked back at me with these wide, terrified eyes, and she opened her mouth and screamed the word "mommy" so loud that people 3 aisles over must have heard it. The woman flinched but did not let go, and I closed the distance between us in what felt like 2 steps, grabbing Lily's other arm and yanking her toward me with every ounce of strength I had. For a moment we were locked in this horrible tug of war, my daughter between us like a rag doll, and I remember screaming something at the woman, but I have no idea what words came out of my mouth. It was pure animal instinct, nothing coherent, just raw noise and fury. The woman finally let go so suddenly that Lily and I stumbled backward into a display of board games that crashed to the floor around us. I pulled Lily into my chest and wrapped both arms around her, feeling her small body shaking against mine, her face pressed into my neck. The woman stood there for maybe 2 seconds, staring at us with this blank expression that I still see sometimes when I close my eyes at night. Then she turned and walked quickly toward the back of the store, not running but moving with purpose, like she had somewhere specific to be. A store employee appeared at the end of the aisle, a young guy with a red vest and a confused look on his face, asking if everything was okay. I could barely get the words out. I kept pointing toward where the woman had gone, trying to explain that she had just tried to take my daughter, but my voice was coming out in these broken gasps that did not sound like language. Lily was crying into my shoulder, repeating, she grabbed me over and over, and other shoppers were starting to gather around us with their phones out. The employee radioed for security, and within a minute there were 2 guards standing with us, a man and a woman, both of them asking me to describe what happened. I gave them every detail I could remember about the woman: her hair color, her cardigan, the floral pattern on her blouse, her calm voice that still echoed in my head. The female guard asked me to come with her to the security office on the 1st floor, and I carried Lily the whole way because I could not stand to let her walk beside me, could not risk having even a foot of distance between us. The security office was a small, windowless room behind the customer service desk, crammed with monitors showing grainy footage from cameras all over the store. The head of security was a heavy-set man named Ron with a gray mustache and kind eyes that made me feel like maybe everything was going to be okay. He sat me down in a plastic chair and handed me a bottle of water while his colleague started rewinding through the footage. Lily had stopped crying, but she would not let go of my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve like she thought I might disappear. I watched the monitors as they scrolled backward through time, seeing myself and Lily arrive at the toy section, seeing the woman approach from somewhere off screen. Ron asked me to walk him through what happened while they searched for the moment when the woman entered the store. I told him everything, every detail I could remember, and he wrote it all down in a little notebook with handwriting so neat it looked like a font. They found her on the footage entering through the main doors about 15 minutes before she grabbed Lily. She walked in alone, browsed through the women's clothing section for a few minutes, then made her way upstairs to toys. Ron zoomed in on her face and printed a still image, her features pixelated but recognizable, that same calm expression she had worn while trying to drag my daughter away. But then he showed me something that made the room feel like it was tilting sideways. He pulled up footage from a camera near the loading dock at the back of the store, time-stamped just 2 minutes after the woman had let go of Lily's arm. There she was, walking quickly through a door marked "Employees Only," and waiting for her in the loading area were 2 men. One was tall and thin with a shaved head, wearing a dark jacket despite the warm weather. The other was shorter, stockier, with a baseball cap pulled low over his face. They were standing next to a white van with no windows in the back, the engine already running. Ron paused the footage and looked at me with an expression that confirmed everything I was already feeling. This was not some confused woman who thought Lily was her niece. This was planned, coordinated, a trap that my daughter had walked right into while I stood 10 feet away checking my phone. The woman climbed into the back of the van, and one of the men slid the door shut behind her. The van pulled out of the loading area and disappeared from the camera's view within seconds. Ron told me the police were already on their way, that they would want to see all of this footage and talk to me about what happened. I nodded, but I was not really listening anymore. I was doing the math in my head, calculating how close we had come to a completely different ending. If Lily had not screamed, if I had looked at my phone for 10 seconds instead of 5, if the woman had been just a little bit faster or a little bit stronger. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 officers in uniform and a detective in plain clothes who introduced herself as Nora Castillo. She had a calm, no-nonsense way about her that reminded me of my older sister, the way she asked questions without ever making me feel like I was being interrogated. I went through the whole story again, start to finish, while she took notes on a tablet. Lily had fallen asleep on my lap by then, exhausted from crying, her thumb in her mouth like she had not done since she was 3. Detective Castillo watched the security footage twice, pausing it in different places, zooming in on the faces of the 2 men by the van. She told me that this fit a pattern they had been tracking for months: organized groups who targeted children in public places, using women as the primary approach because they were less likely to trigger alarm. She said the phrase, "do not make a scene," was something they trained their people to say, a way of making it look like a family dispute rather than an abduction. They never caught them. Detective Castillo called me a few times over the following weeks, updating me on the investigation, but the van's plates had been stolen from a car in Delaware, and the footage was not clear enough to run through facial recognition. She told me that groups like this moved constantly, hitting different stores in different cities, never staying in one place long enough to be tracked. The woman who grabbed Lily could be anywhere by now, could be approaching another child in another toy aisle at this very moment. That thought kept me awake for months, still keeps me awake sometimes. I think about the other parents who were not as lucky as me, the ones who looked at their phones for 10 seconds instead of 5, the ones whose children did not know to scream. I think about what would have happened if that van had pulled away with my daughter inside, where she would have ended up, what they would have done to her. Those thoughts never fully go away. They just get quieter over time. Lily is 14 now, and she still will not let me out of her sight in public places. She does not remember the details of that day anymore. The memories have faded into something vague and dreamlike, but her body remembers. She gets anxious in crowds, reaches for my hand without thinking about it, always positions herself so she can see the exits. We never went back to Brennan's. It closed down a few years later anyway. But every time we pass a department store, she walks a little faster. I taught her everything Detective Castillo told me to teach her. How to scream and fight and never stop making noise. How to yell, "This is not my mom," or "I do not know this person," so bystanders understand what is happening. I check her location on my phone a dozen times a day, even though she is too old for that now. Even though she rolls her eyes every time I text to ask where she is. I know I am overprotective. I know I need to let her grow up. But I keep seeing that woman's calm face. Keep hearing those words in that steady voice. Do not make a scene. Sometimes at night, when everything is quiet and Lily is safe in her room and the house is locked up tight, I let myself feel the full weight of how close we came. And then I get up and check the locks one more time, just to be sure. Every Friday afternoon, right after the school bus dropped me off, my mom would already have my overnight bag packed and waiting by the front door. She and my dad worked double shifts at the textile factory on the edge of town, and weekends meant I stayed at Uncle Vernon's place, a crooked 2-story house on Granger Road in Wilmington, North Carolina. Born in 1989, I was 9 years old during the spring of 1998, when everything changed. Vernon was my dad's younger brother, a quiet man with deep-set eyes and hands that always seemed too still. He worked from home doing something with computers, though I never understood exactly what. His house smelled like pine sol and something else underneath, something metallic that I could never quite place. He kept the curtains drawn even during the day, and the only sounds were the hum of his equipment and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. Uncle Vernon had 3 rules that he repeated every single time I walked through his door. First, I could eat anything in the fridge except the items on the bottom shelf. Second, bedtime was 9 o'clock sharp, no exceptions. Third, and he always said this one slower, leaning down to meet my eyes, I was never under any circumstances to open the basement door. He told me the stairs were rotted through and dangerous, that he kept old electrical equipment down there that could hurt me. The door itself was nothing special, just a plain white door at the end of the hallway near the kitchen. But it had 3 heavy-duty locks on it. Deadbolts, the kind you see on front doors of apartments in bad neighborhoods. Even at 9 years old, I remember thinking that was strange. You do not put 3 deadbolts on a door just to protect a kid from falling down some stairs. But I was a quiet child, obedient to a fault, and Uncle Vernon was always kind to me in his distant way. He let me watch cartoons, made me grilled cheese sandwiches, and never raised his voice. So I followed his rules without question, and I never touched that door. That particular weekend started like any other. My dad dropped me off around 6 in the evening, gave me a quick hug through the car window, and drove off with a tired wave. Uncle Vernon stood on the porch wearing his usual outfit, khaki pants, a faded blue button-down shirt, and those thick glasses that made his eyes look smaller than they were. He smiled when he saw me, but his smiles never quite reached his eyes. They were more like a reflex, something he had learned to do rather than something he felt. We ate dinner together in the kitchen, microwaved lasagna and a glass of milk, while he asked me about school in that flat, distracted way of his. I told him about my spelling test and the new kid in class named Oliver who ate glue. Vernon nodded at all the right moments, but I could tell his mind was somewhere else. He kept glancing at his watch, then toward the hallway where the basement door waited in shadow. After dinner, I settled into my usual spot on the living room couch with a blanket and the remote control. Vernon had basic cable, which meant I could watch Cartoon Network until 9 o'clock. He disappeared into his office down the hall, a small room packed with computer towers and tangled wires, and I heard the familiar click of his door closing. That was normal. He always worked at night, typing away at something I was never allowed to see. Around 8:30, I heard his office door open, followed by his footsteps moving through the house. But instead of coming to check on me, the footsteps went the other direction, toward the kitchen, toward the basement. I heard the metallic scrape of locks being turned, one after another, then the creak of a door opening, then footsteps descending stairs that were supposedly too dangerous for anyone to use. I turned the volume up on the television and pretended I had not noticed. That was what good boys did. They minded their own business and followed the rules. 9 o'clock came and Vernon reappeared from somewhere in the back of the house, his face calm and expressionless as always. He told me it was bedtime, and I did not argue. The guest room was on the second floor, a small space with yellow wallpaper and a twin bed that squeaked every time I moved. There was a window that looked out onto the backyard, but Vernon kept it locked and covered with thick curtains. He tucked me in the way he always did, mechanical, efficient, like he was following instructions from a manual. He said goodnight, turned off the lamp, and closed the door behind him. I lay there in the dark, listening to the old house settle around me. The pipes groaned, the walls creaked, and somewhere beneath me, through the floorboards and the ceiling of the first floor and whatever lay below that, I heard something else. A sound so faint I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. A voice, muffled, distant, but unmistakably human. Someone was crying. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and squeezed my eyes shut. It is just the pipes, I told myself. Old houses make weird noises. That is what my dad always said when our own house creaked at night. But the sound continued, rising and falling in a rhythm that pipes do not make. It was a person, a young person, maybe a teenager, sobbing in short, hitching breaths like they were trying to stay quiet but could not help themselves. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to call out for Uncle Vernon, but something stopped me. Some instinct buried deep in my 9-year-old brain that whispered, "Do not let him know you heard." I do not know how long I lay there, rigid under the covers, listening to that awful sound. It could have been minutes. It could have been an hour. Eventually, the crying stopped. The house went silent. And somehow, despite everything, I fell into a thin, restless sleep filled with dreams I could not remember when I woke. A noise jolted me awake sometime in the middle of the night. The room was pitch black, and for a moment I could not remember where I was. Then it came back to me. Uncle Vernon's house, the guest room, the crying from below. I held my breath and listened. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps on the first floor, directly beneath my room. Then a different sound, something being dragged across the hardwood. It was a scraping, stuttering noise, like something heavy and unwilling being pulled along the floor. I heard the basement door creak open. I heard Uncle Vernon's voice, low and calm, saying words I could not make out. And then I heard another voice, a younger voice, male, pleading in broken, desperate tones. The words were muffled through the floor, but the terror in them was unmistakable. "Please, and stop, and I want to go home." My whole body went cold. I was 9 years old and I did not fully understand what I was hearing, but I knew in some primal animal way that something very bad was happening in this house. I should have stayed in bed. I should have pulled the covers over my head and waited for morning. That is what I tell myself now, decades later, when the memories come back in the middle of the night. But I was a child, and children are curious even when they are afraid, maybe especially when they are afraid. I slipped out from under the blanket and crept toward the bedroom door, my bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. The door was old and heavy, and I opened it just a crack, just enough to see the staircase leading down to the first floor. The hallway below was dim, lit only by a faint glow coming from the direction of the kitchen. I could hear Uncle Vernon's voice more clearly now, that same calm, measured tone he used when he told me the rules. And I could hear the other voice too, the young one, no longer pleading but whimpering softly like an injured animal. Every instinct screamed at me to go back to bed, but my feet carried me forward anyway. I crept down the stairs one at a time, my hand gripping the railing so tight my knuckles ached. At the bottom of the stairs, I pressed myself against the wall and peered around the corner toward the kitchen. The basement door stood wide open, spilling a sickly yellow light into the hallway. And there was Uncle Vernon, his back to me, dragging someone, through that forbidden doorway. The teenager was maybe 15 or 16, with shaggy brown hair matted with sweat and dirt. His wrists were bound behind his back with gray duct tape, and there was more tape wrapped around his mouth, muffling his cries into pathetic nasal moans. His eyes were wide and red-rimmed, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his cheeks. He was wearing a torn green jacket and jeans that were filthy, like he had been wearing them for days, maybe weeks. Vernon pulled him by the collar with one hand, completely unbothered by the boy's thrashing, like he was hauling a bag of garbage to the curb. I stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe, watching my uncle drag a bound and beaten teenager into the basement like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Then Vernon stopped, his head tilted slightly, like a dog hearing a distant whistle. He turned around slowly, and his eyes found me standing at the bottom of the stairs in my pajamas. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The teenager on the ground went still too, his muffled cries cutting off abruptly as he followed Vernon's gaze and saw me. His eyes locked onto mine, and I saw something in them that I will never forget. A desperate, flickering hope, like he thought maybe I could save him. Then Vernon smiled. It was not the mechanical smile I was used to. This one was different. Warmer, almost. Like he was genuinely pleased to see me. He released the teenager's collar and straightened up, brushing off his hands on his khaki pants. "Hey, buddy," he said in that same calm voice. "Go back to bed. You did not see anything." He said it like he was reminding me to brush my teeth. Casual, friendly, like we were having a perfectly normal conversation in the middle of a perfectly normal night. I ran. I do not remember making the decision to run. My body just moved on its own, turning and scrambling back up the stairs on all fours like a frightened animal. I heard Vernon call after me, still calm, still friendly. "It is okay, buddy. Everything is okay. Just go back to sleep." I did not stop. I burst into the guest room and dove under the covers, pulling the blanket over my head and curling into the tightest ball I could manage. My chest heaved. My whole body trembled. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my palms over my ears, trying to block out the world, trying to pretend I was somewhere else. Anywhere else. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, unhurried. Then they stopped outside my door. The handle turned. The door creaked open. I felt Vernon's presence in the room, standing there in the darkness, watching me. Neither of us spoke. After what felt like an eternity, the door clicked shut again. The footsteps retreated down the stairs. And I lay there, shaking, until the first gray light of dawn crept through the curtains. When morning came, Vernon acted like nothing had happened. He made me scrambled eggs and toast, humming softly to himself while he cooked. The basement door was closed and locked, all 3 deadbolts firmly in place. The hallway floor was spotless. No scuff marks, no dirt, no sign that anyone had been dragged across it just hours before. Vernon asked me if I slept well, and I nodded because I did not trust my voice. He smiled that mechanical smile and told me my dad would be picking me up around noon. I sat at the kitchen table and ate my eggs in silence, my eyes fixed on my plate, terrified to look anywhere else. The house smelled like pine sol again, stronger than usual, like Vernon had been cleaning all night. When my dad arrived, I ran to the car without looking back. I climbed into the back seat and stared out the window as we drove away, watching Uncle Vernon wave from the porch, his hand moving slowly back and forth like a metronome. I never told my parents what I saw. I was 9 years old, and I did not have the words. And part of me, a bigger part than I want to admit, was afraid that if I said anything, Vernon would know. Vernon would find out. Vernon would come for me. After that weekend, I refused to go back to Uncle Vernon's house. I threw tantrums, faked sickness, did everything a 9-year-old could do to avoid being left there again. My parents thought I was just being difficult, going through a phase, my mom called it. They tried to force the issue a few times, but I screamed and cried so hard that eventually they gave up and found a neighbor lady to watch me instead. Vernon came to our house for Thanksgiving that year, and I locked myself in my room and refused to come out until he left. My dad was furious with me, said I was being disrespectful to family. I took the punishment, no television for a week, without complaint. It was worth it. Anything was worth it to never be alone with Vernon again. Over the years, I saw him less and less. He moved away when I was 12 somewhere out west, and the family lost touch. I grew up, went to college, got a job, built a life. I buried that night so deep I almost convinced myself it had been a nightmare. Almost. Then, 15 years later, I saw his face on the evening news. Vernon Caldwell, 53 years old, arrested in Albuquerque, New Mexico for the kidnapping and imprisonment of 2 teenage boys. The police had found them in a soundproofed room beneath his garage, malnourished and terrified, but alive. The news anchor said Vernon had been linked to at least 4 other missing persons cases across 3 states, dating back over 2 decades. They showed his mugshot, older now, grayer, but with those same deep-set eyes and that same flat expression. I sat on my couch and stared at the screen, and suddenly I was 9 years old again, standing at the bottom of those stairs, watching my uncle drag a bound teenager into the darkness. I thought about the boy in the green jacket, the one whose eyes had begged me for help. I never found out what happened to him. I looked through every article, every court document I could find, but his name was never mentioned. Maybe he escaped. Maybe Vernon let him go. Or maybe he is still down there somewhere, in a basement I never had the courage to report, buried beneath a house that was torn down years ago. I will never know. And I think that is the part that haunts me most, not what I saw, but what I did not do. I was just a kid. I know that. But some nights when the house is quiet and the memories come flooding back, I still hear that muffled crying through the floorboards. And I wonder if things might have been different, if I had just found the words to speak.